Tough Fish show. I am so excited to bring to you back Donna Norman-Carbone. Donna, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun the first time. I couldn't wait to dive back into the pond.
Thank you so much. The pond is such a cool place to be. So what have you been up to since we chatted last?
Oh, I've been up to a lot of things, Jen. I have learned so much since the last time I talked to you. I started a new podcast with my bookish bestie. Her name is Hope Gibbs. We co-host a podcast. We talk about the things that we learned the hard way because we started posting it between both of our debuts. So talk about diving into the pond. We dove in deep. But we're enjoying that. We're finding our way. And I just released another book this past week. So I've been very busy and doing all the things that I love. So it's a good busy.
Yeah, I love that. And congratulations on this new release. Very
Thank
cool.
you.
So,
Thank you.
so let's talk about the podcasting part first.
Sure.
What was that like to make that decision? Like what really got you to make the decision to say, I want to host my own show versus I want to continue guesting because they're two different
Right.
parts. I mean, yes, they're cousins, but they're
Yeah.
still related, that they're still a little different. So what got you started with thinking about hosting?
Sure. Actually, it was just kind of as my friendship grew with Hope. Let me kind of bring you back. So we both signed our contracts with Red Adept within a week or two of each other. And we felt like the newbies, we neither one of us knew what was going on. Everything was new to us. So at every juncture, we would check in with each other. I've done this. Did you do this? How did you handle it? What are some of the things that you're looking at to do this? So we did that often through the whole process. And as we neared closer to our pub dates, we kept talking about how, it's wonderful becoming an author, but you can't foresee all the things that you need to learn. I definitely did not foresee like the whole marketing piece. I knew I needed a website. I knew I needed social media. Much beyond that, I really didn't. Ads, scheduling events, being your own publicist, those were things that I didn't even conceive of. And so, as Hope and I went through this process together, we kept talking about the things we learned the hard way. And I jokingly said, wouldn't that be fun to do like a podcast about all the things we did the hard way? And so she laughed about it. And then I don't know, things just started to it made sense to me that coming from two debut authors talking about the things that we learned the hard way would be a very credible thing because we'd just gone through the process. It was still new enough that we can talk about the things that surprised us, the obstacles that we had to overcome. And I think, being a teacher, I'm a full-time English teacher. I do like to help other people. I like to teach other people. So that came naturally. So, eventually I said to Hope, I was like, do you really want to do this? Like, we can really do this. And so we figured it out. She handles all of the taping. I handle, well, we started taking on guests now occasionally, but we kind of take a different approach to our guests. Our guests aren't really talking about their books as much as their writing and publishing process because we really want it to stay, in line with our brand and the message that we want to get across to our audience. So that's where we started.
I love that. And this show is like that too, where it's not about the latest book or the book. Yes, I
Right.
appreciate the effort into the book, most certainly as an author and an editor, but I also would rather, without you, the author, there is no book. So I
Yeah.
would rather
Yeah.
get to know that person and then get their message out. And yes, there's books too, kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
I know. Well, one of the things I loved about being on this podcast the first time is that we had never met prior to this, and I felt like we were old friends by the end of it. So
Thank
you
you.
were a very positive experience for me. And you might have even been the very first podcast that I did. So if not the first, very early on. So that was a positive experience.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I appreciate that. And but it does take courage to ask someone, hey, to be on a show, or you get even if you get a request to be on somebody's show, it still takes courage to not just say yes, but then also show up, go do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that you were saying yes to each opportunity, even if it felt a little uncomfortable, even if you didn't know what you didn't know. And it
Yeah.
also sounds like you were also discerning when to say no too, because sometimes you want
Right.
to, sometimes maybe it's not the right fit, or maybe it's not the right season, or maybe, it's just the timing's not working out for whatever reason. It's
Mm.
okay to say no too. And you need to be able to be just as confident doing that as you do to say yes. So that's what I hear that was
Yeah.
evolving in this process for you.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it takes confidence in yourself and what you're doing to learn how to say no. I tell the young teachers at school that often because they always get tapped on to, do the things that some of the veteran teachers wouldn't do. And I say to them, one day you're going to feel comfortable saying, no, my plate is full. And it's very liberating to do that and to know and to decipher the things that are going to serve you that you really want to take on versus the things that are not going to serve you. And you know that. And so it's better if somebody else does it anyway, instead of you doing it halfway.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And so I'm curious, how did this discernment and saying yes and saying no show up in the writing process for book two? Like how did that differ from book one? And what did you do that was similar? And what did
Hmm.
you do that you said, no, not doing that, or not doing it that
Right.
way? I mean, did that also, how did that show up in the writing?
It took me 10 years to write All That Is Sacred, and it took me 3 to write Of Lies and Honey. So I think I felt more confident as a writer after having gone through so many different drafts and 3 different rounds of queries with All That Is Sacred. Of Lies and Honey, I think number 1, I was a better writer. Number 2, I really wanted to challenge myself to write in multiple POVs. I tried that with All That Is Sacred, didn't go as well. And so I kind of reverted back to one narrator, at which I think was absolutely the right decision for that book. So this book, I wanted to try working in three POVs. So that was something that was very different. The first book, I relied a lot on what I knew and different kinds of personal experiences. Whereas this book, I really found the idea from a story that I had read. It was an article, and so that's where the inspiration came from. And I just kind of, took off with that. So in it, I explore kind of 3 parallel lives and 3 women all dealing with some aspect of motherhood, and they collide at some point. So this was a lot more of plotting instead of like finding my voice. It was me paying attention to sort of where the stories kind of connect because they do all converge at one time. So I needed to kind of drop clues throughout. I called it puzzling. I felt like this book was a great puzzle to put together. And so yeah, so in that way, this book is very different from the first one, although there are some similar themes that carry through that I think are me. You know what I mean? It's part of my brand, I think, and it's who I am. I can't really and don't want to distance myself from, topics like motherhood and, being a strong woman and friendship. Those are things that I hold near and dear to my heart. So those probably will thread through all of my work.
I would imagine that they would, and a spirituality to it too, because I
Yeah.
can see that in you, in addition to your social posts, but it was in book one. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's also a part of, to your point, the brand, the books, and so forth. And
Right.
something you said about shifting points of view and really like, trying again. Basically, you
Mhm.
tried the first time and realized this doesn't feel right, but it was better for book one to stay in one point of view. But
Right.
what was it like to really get into the details of of 3 points of view, because to your point, yeah, there are intersections, so they all need various arcs, they all need points where they're intersecting, they all need to keep going in their own little ways too, separately as well. So how
Yeah.
did you get into that? Let's kinda go into detail.
Yeah, one of the things that I did, one thing that was very important to me was to have their voices be very different or at least distinguishable, maybe not very different. They're all from the South. There is one character, I felt like there was a continuum. So there was one character who was a very cliche, not cliche in her personality, but in her language, like what you would think of when you heard a Southern accent. She does also use a lot of idioms in her speech. There's another character who is very career oriented, so she's very careful with her words. She also has a very guarded personality. So I tried to make her very careful with the things that she said and not reveal too much. And then the main who I would say is mostly the main character, although they all kind of are. She is someone who feels very deeply and isn't afraid to say anything. So really, I think I determined like how to distinguish each of them through the language that I used with them and also the amount of depth to their character, like the things that they were willing to reveal came out differently for each of them.
Yes. So it sounds like you got to know those characters a little bit first, but
Yeah.
then did one of them, it sounds like the one that you said might be the main character.
Yeah,
sh-
Callie is really kind of the heart of the story.
So she probably showed up first and almost in a little bit more, I don't, I'm going to say present. Like she probably really came a little bit more developed in some cases. And so did you write her story first and then come back with character 2 and write her through and then character 3 and work her through? I'm like, how did you kind of build
So
this out?
actually, you know what? You're kind of right. Like one of the first drafts that I had was mostly Callie's story. I would say I didn't really even conceive of the other two characters very early on. I was just writing Callie's story. And that was in an effort to really get to know her. And then when I decided to bring the other two characters in, I brought the other two characters in at the same time. One of them I felt like I knew better right away than I knew the other one. And even my very last edit, my developmental edit with my publishing house, that was the one comment she said is that we need to know Harper better. And Harper is my very guarded character. And that is the opposite of me. So it was probably the most of a struggle to write Harper's character, and that came through with my editor. So that was something that I needed to work on, but I think I did. And I think as a writer, some things do come easier than other things. And that's the beauty of having editors look at your work with fresh eyes to say, hey, this isn't working out as well as maybe you think it is. So you need to go back in and zhuzh.
I love that word. I use that all the time. I use it all in corporate too. In fact, I would get teased for using zhuzh, but when I'm like, we need to zhuzh this up. And they're like, how do you spell that? I'm like, just look at
Yeah,
me. You know what
there
it is.
actually is a spelling for it.
There is one. And I was like, but you know what it is. You just know. And so
Yeah.
when I would tease my guys back at corporate, I'm like, we need to zhuzh this up. They're like, there's a Jen word again. I'm like, hey, but you know. But I love that. I love that you embraced that feedback from your editor,
Mm.
and that also pushed your writing, but that
Hmm.
also was a discerning opportunity to say, do I really need to do this? Yes, I
Hmm.
do, or no, I don't. And
Yeah.
the fact that you decided yes
Yeah.
meant that you were saying no to, maybe the book might be at a certain level. It might
Hmm.
be like, if by saying, if you had said no, it also might have been saying, I'm staying a little bit more in my comfort zone. But what
Yeah.
you said yes to was a better experience for the reader, a better
Mm.
experience for you to grow as a writer, and to kind of help your other characters see her too. Because once
Mm.
they started to see her and hear her, or perceive her reactions, or watch what she was doing, they might have interacted a little differently. That as they got more information, it might have been like, "Oh, I wow, oh," or
Yeah.
quizzical looks exchanging between them that might not have happened before.
Yeah.
So I feel like that also forced your characters to grow because the one
Mhm.
character was.
Yeah, I totally absolutely agree. Yeah, there was only that was the major thing that I got back from my developmental editor, but there was one other, and I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but there's another character that is in the beginning of the book and kind of shows up at the end of the book, and she thought I shouldn't have this character show up at the end of the book. And I just felt so strongly that the character needed to. So it's funny because people who have read it early, I'm asking about that scene where the character shows up again and getting feedback. And so I'm absolutely glad that I kind of stuck with my gut on that one because I do think I think it worked out.
I love that, and that also goes back to discernment because you're saying,
Hmm.
you know, you got feedback and said, "Okay, what do I do with this?"
Yeah.
And even if you were teetering on testing it out and writing it a little bit differently, it might have also started to feel like inside where there's it's one thing to get pushed out of your comfort zone in the craft, but you know that it's
Hmm.
the right thing. It's another thing that you are trying something, pushing on something, but you know that something's just not working the way it's going that way, or it's
Yeah.
showing up. And
Yeah.
I love that what I hear you doing is making it being really clear and
Hmm.
understanding what was showing up, because that
Yeah.
discomfort can be a little confusing. It can be one of those of, well, maybe I just maybe it's just because I really didn't wanna do that, versus,
Yeah.
no, mm,
There's a reason. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Why
love
this is
that.
here. Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
and I kind of think that goes back to the confidence piece too, right? I wonder if it was my first go around and my editor said you need to do this, if I would have just blindly said, okay, if she's telling me to do this, I should probably do it. So I don't know. I think that comes with confidence, being able to decide, what is important, when it's important, and how it's going to serve you, or in this case, your book, your work.
Yes, and so to your point, when I'm editing, when I'm doing a developmental edit and I see something that I think I'm seeing it a slightly different way, I
Hmm.
will present it in some cases like, here's what I'm seeing. I recommend, or here's what my thought is, or my
Mm,
perspective is, because I recognize that it is a different perspective. And I want
right.
the author to make the decision for themselves because it's their vision, it's their book. And if they go, thanks, Jen, but no, hey,
Mm,
peace. It
yeah.
is your
Yeah.
book. But if they're
Yeah.
like, I needed that, and I might do it a little differently than what you're suggesting, but I get what the intent is, that's cool too, but I think you also, to your point, it's not just confidence in yourself and in your writing, it's also confidence in the team that you put together, the team
Hmm.
that you're working with, that you have a really good synergy there and that you do trust what that person is saying. And even if that person is spot on in what they're suggesting, you still need to go back and make sure you are good with it and
Hmm.
truly be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely true. I
You
like what you said about having synergy with the team that you put together, because I that's something that I have felt with my critique partners over the years. Some have really worked out and totally get, what I'm trying to do, and I get what they're trying to do, and there are some that don't. So, that's goes back to that idea of discernment as well. You need to make sure there's like some kind of chemistry, that you're understanding what each other is trying to achieve.
Well, and that's also what you and Hope did to create the
Yeah.
podcast. You have synergy between you. You were both discerning what my skill sets are, what do I want to do, how does this serve your individual businesses, so that when you
Mhm.
came together in a collaborative way, that it was amplifying both of you, and that you both are coming at this from a way to make the decisions that are going to further enhance all of the pieces, not just one of the
Yeah.
pieces. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I love
That is so
that.
true.
So playing off of this of discernment and synergy,
Mm.
talk to me about the difference between going from debut to book 2?
Oh, I have compared this whole process to birthing children the entire time. And I feel like my first book was like when I had my first child. I couldn't wait. I I was anticipating the next step and the next step and the next step and not really sitting in where I was. And I kind of think it was, out of maybe anxiety, I don't know. Like it was like the need to kind of find out what's coming next and what that's going to be about. And this book, I am fine that it's taken the amount of time that it has. I'm enjoying it, and I'm knowing that, okay, after my developmental edits, it might not be for 4 months that I get my line edits. That's okay. I have this, and this I can do in that time, and I can rethink about my book to see if there's any changes to make. So I think just the idea of kind of being in the moment and sort of enjoying that.
I love that because to your point, when something is new, it's
Mm,
to your point, first book, first podcast, first book
mhm.
signing, first anything. There's an element of because you don't know what you don't know. You thought you did enough research. Then you're finding out things that you don't know and trying to figure out how to weave in what you now have learned that you didn't know that you wish you had. And it feels
Yeah,
like you're not necessarily behind the 8 ball, but it's a little hard to, you think you can enjoy it. Oh, you learned something else. And so you want to weave it in. And then you also have deadlines that you're working with because that event or that interview or that publication date, those are dates that are probably not going to be moving. So you're figuring out, okay, curveball just happened. Now what do I do with that? Or new idea that I'd like to incorporate. How much time can I figure this out? So
right.
there's so much, and there's a form of excitement that's different that when you do your next one, you're still excited, but this it's a different type of excitement because now it feels like I've learned a little bit more. I feel like I can do I know how to push a little bit differently and I can do
Yeah.
that again. So that's kind of what I'm hearing too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many different buckets. I don't know. I refer them to them as buckets. So, you've got your events that you want to plan. You've got your social media that you need to get out there. You've got, reviews that are coming in that you want to respond to because these people took time to write this review for your book, so you need to thank them. And so I know what's important to me now, and what I can what could be malleable and I can kind of push to the side for a bit, and what I need to deal with right now. So I'm definitely more informed that way, and making better choices. So a mutual friend of ours, Grace Salmon, always says, I throw spaghetti at the wall sometimes to see what sticks, and I feel like I did that quite a bit for the first go round, and now I'm smarter about the things that I know that I didn't know back then. I know what worked, I know what didn't work. I know what should get my priority, what should be lower on the priority list. So, I think there's that, and hopefully every time I publish a book, I'll know a little bit more and be a little smarter. So yeah, I that kind of helps put me in that zen space, where I can enjoy it.
Yes, yes, and that beautifully just ties back to your point about confidence and what we've been chatting about with the discernment pieces. And
Yeah.
but you know what? I also sometimes it also can come down to your expectation that
Mhm.
you know the more time you have doing something, the better you're able to calibrate yourself
Mhm.
and your expectation. And not that you aren't like still reaching for a big goal or what have you. It's just that what might be a big step for you might
Mhm.
not be to somebody else, and it might
Mhm.
be gigantic to another person. And the thing is that if it feels right for you, if it feels like that next big thing for you, and you know it's the right thing for you to do, you'll find a way to do that and to
Yeah.
not try to judge how you're doing against somebody else too. And I hear a lot of that coming through too in the discernment and the confidence building because it was, where am I? What am I
Yeah.
doing? How can I learn? How can I grow? Not I'm comparing against other people, and now what? I
Yeah.
like how you focused it on what was in your control.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Someone said, and I wish I remembered who it was, that, you should never compare your author journey to someone else's. And
Right.
that has been a piece of advice that I come back to again and again because I have gone down that rabbit hole. And
Mm.
there are other authors at the publishing company where I am who have more reviews. There are some who have less reviews. There are people at other publishing companies that are, maybe getting a better interview, or you know what I mean. There's always going to be the opportunity to compare yourself with other people, but I am learning that I need to focus on my own goals and give myself credit for the goals that I accomplish and kind of push myself appropriately. So that is something that I do remind myself of often.
I love that. I love that. So, how else has book two been? I loved how you used the word zen. I love that. How else has that been? Because to your point, I mean, it was at the time of this recording, it published, rather released a couple of days ago. So, what has that been like? What were some of the things that you were doing to gear up for the release? And now
Yeah.
post release, like, would you talk a little bit about that? Because it's definitely very fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I did this time that I didn't even know was in existence last time was I did a NetGalley co-op. I think it was called the Victoria NetGalley co-op. But basically, you sign up with a woman, sort of orchestrates it, and you sign up with other authors just to kind of have it be more financially, attainable, because NetGalley is pretty expensive. So basically, the big five will reach out to NetGalley, put people's work on NetGalley so you can get early ARC readers to read it so you can kind of get some traction. And so I did this thing, definitely much more affordable. And I've gotten a lot of really positive reviews. And one thing that I really like about it is that I can approve or disapprove of the people who are requesting to buy my book, I mean, to read my book. So I can click on their profile. I can take a look at other reviews that they've reviewed. I could take a look at the genres of the books they've reviewed. So that way I'm kind of vetting people that I think are likely to like my book. And I think that's one thing too that I've learned from the last book is really kind of narrowing my audience a little bit. I didn't know quite how to do that last time. And I think narrowing my audience and trying to target that audience is something that I think I definitely know now. I know how to do things like Facebook ads and Amazon ads, which was something that I didn't even know that authors could or should do when I published my first one. So I had to learn those the hard way. So, I feel like I'm in a better place to market my book.
Very cool. And to your point, I mean, ideally, you want reviews from people who truly are interested in the genre, like they read the genre a lot. And at least in this first part, when you're really trying to drum up more interest, if you have other reviews that come through where maybe they learned about, started getting into the genre because they read your book, hey, that's great. But if you
Yeah.
see somebody who is like, that's really a lot of what they read, that's pretty cool too, because then you're kind of sitting in a space where I think I've identified this pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that they're comparing my book to other people, other authors as well, because they know the genre and they're comfortable in it. So I don't know. I just thinking about my target audience was not something that was top of mind with my first book.
So when you started zoning in on this
Mhm.
target audience, what were some things that you discerned? That's become my
Mhm.
favorite word during this conversation. But what were some of the things that you discerned to be able to do that more so with book two?
I don't know. I think it was exposing myself to different people's opinions, podcasts, story chapters about branding and, speaking to your audience instead of like going like completely wide and saying
Mm.
all women should love this. I would love all women to love this, but not all women will. This particular book is geared more towards mothers, people who have experienced some aspect of motherhood. And I think those are the people who will enjoy it and identify with it the most.
I love that. I love that. And that goes back to being confident and saying, this is who I wanted to serve with this book, and I'm okay that I am. And
Yeah.
that I love that so much. Donna, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Where can people connect with you? Where can they hear your podcast with Hope? And where can they get your books?
Sure. So my podcast is called Authors Talking Bookish, and we do have a website with all the links on it. It's called authorstalkingbookish.com, all one word. My own website is donnanormancarbone.com, all one word. And I would love it if you would subscribe to my monthly newsletter, for which I have a giveaway, which I wrote an essay called Behind the Story right now. So if you sign up, you get that for free, and you can get my book, Of Lies and Honey, anywhere online: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, Apple, Google Play, and those are all linked on my website as well.
Donna, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jen. I love being here. I love what you're doing with authors because I love hearing all about the writing process, and you ask the best questions.
Thank you so much.